Hello and welcome to Shoot the Breeze, where we take a nostalgic look at a random football magazine from the past. I'm Andy Smith, aka Scott's Footy Cards on Twitter, and with me is Tom Brogan.
Hello.
In each episode we'll invite a special guest to join us in trawling through the magazine and discuss anything contained within it. This could be anything from an article, to a photograph, to a competition, to an advert. Basically, if it's in it, then we'll talk about it. So sit back and let's shoot the breeze.
Wriggles clear, might just get the chip, and he does, he's scored! Oh, what a great backlash! He's done it! Oh, brilliant! Wiggling his way, that's an excellent one, and Didi! It's a goal, that's four for Clydebank. Excellent play by Hughes. I think the player of the match, and sweetly finished by Pele.
Hello, and welcome to part 2 of our podcast with Jonathan Wilson.
All right, before we go back into the magazine, Jonathan, I was just going to ask a wee bit about your books, because you've written about a wide number of subjects. I think it's fair to say you've not done the same thing twice. I was just going to ask, what's been your sort of favourite of all your books for the sort of research period? What's been the most enjoyable one to research?
That's really difficult. I mean, the Inverting the Pyramid was one of those books where it's the only book while I was writing it, I was pretty confident it was going to sell well and be well received. That it sort of, I guess without really knowing it, I've been doing research on that for sort of 15 or 20 years before I came to write it. And I didn't realise I had all these ideas, or even that they sort of meshed together in a vaguely sort of coherent theory. So that was great, because it sort of felt substantial and worthwhile, even as I was doing it. In terms of the specific research, doing the Angels of Dirty Faces, the Argentina book, was great. Just, spending a lot of time sitting in cafes with old Argentinians while they slagged off everybody they'd ever played with. It was a load of fun. And then the Hungry book, Names Had Long Ago, that's probably got the most important original research, actually going through archives and demolishing myths that have grown up over the 60 or 70 years and getting a clearer picture of what life was like in Nazi-occupied Budapest, which was, I mean, some of the stories are just horrific. You kind of, that was a book where you'd write a bit, and then you'd suddenly realise you were crying as you wrote it. Just stuff is so awful. But I think in that awfulness lies its value as well. That could happen in a very sophisticated, very civilized city, in a place that had assumed it was too sophisticated for that ever to happen, and it wasn't.
All right, thanks, Jonathan. We jump back into the magazine. This is up in price, down in numbers. Last season's 6-figure transfers compared with those of 1972-73. Again, this is a lot of facts, a lot of detail here, and the list, the 6-figure transfers in Britain from 1962, Dennis Law Torino to Man United, up to the closed season signings. Again, this would have been a gold mine for your pub boa at the time, who would be able to recite all these £115,000 transfers. But anything that jumps out at you here? A few names, well-known names, and maybe not so well-known names there.
Yeah, but I think the interesting thing about this is the fact it's being discussed at all. That we sort of think of this sort of distaste and sort of what's what I'm looking for, sort of revulsion at money in football as being quite a modern phenomenon. But it's clearly sort of playing around in the background. I mean, this doesn't sort of say this is appalling. That how can we be spending 100 grand on Peter Osgood when there's a nursing crisis or whatever. But it sort of underlies it. There's a concern about money and finance you see here. So something I noticed. I try to think. I think maybe was it even as long ago I was doing my book on Liverpool, or maybe it was a Clough book. So that's as if I kind of can't remember. I'm just sort of listing my books to advertise them. I genuinely can't remember which of the books it was. But
I have the Clough book here.
No, it is in the Clough book. Yeah, it is, because it's a piece in the Derby Evening Telegraph from 1968 by Malcolm Edwards. So it's a Derby just got promoted. Is 68? Is it, or is it 69 maybe? And he says, you can't expect Derby to compete. And he uses, I don't think he quite used the word super clubs, but he definitely uses the word super in the sense that we would understand it with super clubs. And he's talking very obviously of Liverpool and Leeds, who he specifies. And he also sort of hints that they're part of a bigger group. And I think you can assume that in that, he also means Manchester United, Arsenal and Everton. And what's fascinating about that is I think it's the first use of this term, or this idea that there are super clubs who somehow their finances give them a position above everybody else. And in the 35 years from him writing that to Roman Abramovich arriving at Chelsea, the only teams who win the league are those 5 clubs plus Aston Villa, who were already the third most successful team in English history. So we sort of think of the 60s as being, in English football, as being this, 8 different champions, this time of great variety where there's a great equality at the top of the division. And I think in many ways that was the greatest period of English football. Just starting to make an impact in Europe. So it was certainly by the end of the 60s, after the World Cup win, getting to the semi-final of the European Championship in 68. It's a reasonable case that English football, late 60s, was simultaneously very, very competitive in Europe and very, very competitive within itself. And so Eamon Dunphy, in his book on Busby, talks about that as being sort of the golden age. And he talks as well about the perfect blend of sort of physicality and technique. That it's a physical battle, but it's also skill is allowed to flourish. And tactically, it's become very interesting. All the Ramsey and his imitators, and yet already the seed is there for the big club stitch up we see today. And of course, what's interesting about that 5, about 5 plus Villa, so let's call it a 6, is that very clearly Villa and Everton and Leeds are not in it anymore. Arsenal certainly are, United certainly are, Liverpool certainly are, and then what's propelled the other clubs into that bracket? It's artificial inflation from external sources. So Abramovich at Chelsea and Sheikh Mansour at City, and then Tottenham. I mean, they're sort of floating on the fringes then, floating on the fringes now, and obviously haven't won the league in that period. So Leicester are really the only exception in 50 years, and that I think is a very sad thing. But I thought this was interesting just because clearly people are starting to worry about money and what's it doing and what impact could it have.
So Andy, anything you're going to pull out from that?
I'm just sort of looking at the number of Scots that are in these. That it was a golden period for Scots coming from Scotland to England. You got Alex Forsyth, Louis McCarry, Ted McDougall, even though he was already down in England, Peter Marinello, Keith McRae. I mean, there's just loads of names there. Joe Harper,
Jim Baxter.
Yep. I see Dennis Stewart's. I'm not a Scot, but you spoke of Dennis Stewart earlier on. He's mentioned there, 275,000 from Sunderland to Man City. But yeah, Jim Pearson, Stuart Pearson, who is a Scot as well, but he moved from Hull City. David Hay. It's just loads and loads of Scot, and it's good to see that there is a bit of that. Not to this degree, but there is a bit of movement again recently in the last maybe 4 or 5 years of top quality Scots coming down to England and actually being regulars. Andy Robertson, Cian Tierney being classic examples of it, but nowhere near these sort of levels.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's what we mentioned earlier, isn't it? That there's not the little herd of Macedonian international. There's not the kind of the big Brazilian stars. It's very much more, well, but legally it had to be very much more home-based people.
Right, we over the page again to Bobby Moore's column. Bobby Moore writes for you, and this is headline: "The Good Life Has Its Problems." And so Bobby Moore sort of goes into the life of a footballer with endorsements and the trappings of fame. I mean, I would give it a go, but yeah, he talks about the various things that you need to do to make the extra bread on the side. Talks about things like This Is Your Life as well, and the pressure that's on the big players. Anything
Yeah,
you want to...
well, I guess there's a couple of things there, isn't there? So there's the fact that clearly in those days, I mean, I know they do this today, but to make proper money, he had to do the endorsements. Playing for West Ham was not going to make him sufficient money, and then the fact that when his career was over and a couple of failed stints in management, and he ends up being just a sort of bloke on the radio in London. He's a bloke who does co-commentary for West Ham games, and it sort of seems such a probably arguably one of the top 2 or 3 English footballers of all time, or England footballers of all time. Yeah. And you say in the World Cup, it's him and Charlton are the two. And yet he doesn't make anywhere near enough out of the game to be able to properly retire when it's over. So the fact that even that sort of low level of fame, comparatively, he found difficult, I think is interesting.
Was it Bobby Moore we were talking about in a recent podcast, Tom? The same sort of column where he was talking about during the summer they'd be out digging roads, and there was definitely that story, and I'm pretty sure it was Bobby Moore. But just the idea that these footballers during the summer would have to supplement it by, going out in roads and digging them up and laying tarmac and stuff like that. It's just it's so far removed from today's superstars, and some of them not.
Yeah, and even being paid less in the summer.
Yeah.
Because the maximum wage when it first came in was £20 in the winter and £18. I think 18, might have been 16 even in the summer. The idea being we're not playing games, so we're not going to pay you a full whack. Yeah, obviously being expected to sort of stay in shape but the fact that they actually had a summer, the fact that they weren't going off on tours I mean, when Clough got to Derby, trying to think who the player was. Might have been Chris Balderson, it might have been somebody else. And he sort of gave him an ultimatum, like, are you a footballer or are you a cricketer? Because you can't do both. I'm not going to have you missing games because you're off playing for Derbyshire. Which seems such a strange idea.
I think that happened with Andy Gorham as well when he was playing for Rangers, or when he came to play for Rangers. He was also playing cricket as well. I don't know who for.
Well, he played international cricket, didn't he?
Wasn't that one of your quiz questions in the Blizzards?
Yeah, it was. Which Scottish goalkeeper once scored 4 against Australia?
There we go.
Right, okay. If we go over again then to Shoot Spotlight, April 74. There's a lot of, again, probably filler, but lots of good wee pieces. I've found where to start. Brazil upset fans. World champions Brazil were booed and jeered by 85,000 spectators in the Maracanã as they stumbled to a 1-1 draw against Mexico in a friendly. So this is good. This is going over everything that's happened in April 74 as part of a month-by-month look back at the 73-74 season.
When there's the picture of Bob Wilson, who, like, I don't think he's ever looked any different to that.
No.
I've never seen a picture of him. And he could be like 15 or 65, and he looks identical. Like, it's...
That's a wee bit about Bob Wilson saying he's going to retire at 32 and take up a job with the BBC.
Well, he presented Football Focus for years, didn't he? He was like nearly 20 years presenting Football Focus.
Yeah, I mean, I think it took me years to realise he'd been a footballer. It was like, all I knew him from was Football Focus.
Yeah, well, he was because he played against Sunderland that semi-final in '73. I only had sort of 2 images of him. So one of it's him desperately flapping backwards as I think it's a Billy Hughes header goes over him. And then the other is him sort of not being particularly good at reading an auto cue, although he did get much better as he went on. And then, you still see him at Arsenal now, and he's an absolutely lovely bloke. But it just hasn't changed at all. Just looks identical.
So, quiz question. Let's see if you know this. Do you know his middle name?
Primrose.
There we go. The charity partner this season is the West Dunbartonshire Community Foodshare. This is a charitable organisation that provides various services and support to the local community, including the following: a school uniform bank, school holiday brunch bags, food provisions, Christmas toy bank, cooking and growing lessons, and a baby bank. They provide essential support to the local community in supporting individuals and families, and we will be looking to support them in any way we can through the podcast. This will include drives for donations of food, money, and support in the form of volunteers. We will also be raising awareness of the group to highlight the work that they do, but also to ensure that families and individuals who can benefit from the group are aware of these vital services. You can follow them on the West Dunbartonshire Community Foodshare group on Facebook or West Dunbartonshire Community Foodshare.co.uk for the website, and that's West Dunbartonshire with an N. You can also donate through our Just Giving page for the charity at justgiving.com/fundraising/shoot the breeze, one word. Also keep an eye on our Twitter accounts at shoottb_podcast and at Scott's Footy Cards for updates and news on our charity partner. We'd like to say a special thank you to Pete Wiley of the Mighty Wah for the use of the Story of the Blues in the music for our show. You can catch up with Pete on petewiley.co.uk, where you can check out the details of upcoming gigs and new music. We'd also like to thank our producer Diane Jardin for her great work and support on the podcast. Please check out transmissionroom.co.uk, where you can book music recording and rehearsal facilities in Clydebank.
So there's a wee bit there as well. 3 sent off. So that's the Celtic and Atletico Madrid European Cup semi-final at Parkhead, an infamous game. Where 3 Atletico Madrid players were sent off. And there's a wee bit there, Old Trafford Riot as well, Saturday the 27th. And sort of just rounding up all the last sort of day of the season games, last full day of the 73-74 season in England and Scotland. At Old Trafford, United's match against fierce rivals Manchester City was abandoned 4 minutes from time owing to a rioting crowd. So that's the famous game where Dennis Law scored late on for Man City.
Yeah, I mean, and the incredible thing about that is, I mean, just United being relegated just seems such a... To be relegated 6 years after you've won the European Cup.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that is the biggest change in modern football, that sort of safety net isn't there. But and I sort of feel United haven't learned at all from that period. That, I find it an incredible statistic that only 3 managers have ever won the league with United.
Yeah.
And all the problems they had replacing Busby, they just repeated replacing Ferguson. And you can talk about the sort of lack of football knowledge of the Glazers, but it's sort of almost like the club itself doesn't understand itself. 50 years on, they're just making exactly the same errors.
Do you think, Jonathan, was Moyes the wrong man at the time, or should he have been given more time in the job?
I almost think it doesn't matter who the manager was. I think it's a structural issue. That the problem was that Fergie did everything. He was his own sporting director. And okay, David Gill had come in and has obviously been very successful as CEO. So to lose Fergie and David Gill at the same time was catastrophic. These 2 great sort of fonts of wisdom had both went. And it's the same with Arsenal replacing Wenger, that you can probably isolate things that had begun to go wrong. I know Fergie won the league this last season, but you isolate things that had begun to go wrong in those final years as they became slightly more distant from modern football. but their personalities were just about enough to keep it together. Fergie more so than Wenger. But then when that personality is gone, and you lose the fact that Fergie could walk into any ground, everybody knew who he was straight away. Everybody felt an urge to help him. He knew exactly who to talk to for everything. Okay, I've heard about this young player at Auxerre, say, who, I wonder if he's good enough for us. And he'd know 2 or 3 people near Auxerre who he could ring up. And they would say, yeah, he's really talented, but, likes a drink, probably don't bother. And that was how he did it. And now, they boast about having looked at, I can't remember how many, some absurd number, 470 different right backs before they signed Aaron Wan-Bissaka. And so, hang on, you looked at 470, you end up with the bloke everybody was talking about from Crystal Palace who actually doesn't fit the way you play. So, where you should be getting the bloke we haven't heard of who turns out to be perfect.
Yeah.
You've ended up with the bloke everybody's heard of who doesn't fit. So, in retrospect, Moyes clearly should have been given more time because nothing's got better since. I would give Van Gaal more time. I think the football towards the end under Van Gaal there was evidence of it beginning to click. But I have to say, I'm very much a Van Gaal loyalist. I interviewed him in, I think it was 2016, and he's one of the hardest people I've ever had to interview, mainly because he asks you quiz questions all the time. So you'd say something like, why did you shift to a back three just before the 2014 World Cup? And he goes, well, who was my defence? I mean, I've got to try and think. Who was the Dutch defence? He goes, Daryl Janmaat, Ron Vlaar. I don't know. Some other people. I don't know. Okay, they weren't very good. I assume that's the point you're making. But yeah, I came out of that interview with absolutely. It was brilliant because he told me loads of stuff, and he kind of he made me see things in a different way. He's very good. He used to be a teacher, and you can see that he's very good at getting you to agree with his point of view without actually telling you what his point of view is. He leads you to that point of view. But I came out with this. It was the day of a League Cup final, and I remember coming out with this absolutely throbbing headache, and going into a cafe and just downing water and coffee, trying to kind of get my mind back together before going to cover the League Cup final. So I mean, yes, Moyes probably should have been given more time. Van Gaal probably should have been given more time. Mourinho's never been appointed in the first place. Solskjaer was only necessary because of Mourinho, and I certainly wouldn't have kept him on beyond his caretaker period. Rangnick was a bizarre fudge of putting somebody who might have been the right man in absolutely the wrong job. He was clearly the wrong man to be a coach. I think he might have worked as a sporting director had he had control and authority. And I fear Ten Hag will fail because the structures at the club aren't just not fit for purpose.
Anything else we can see from those 2 pages there?
I mean, I'm looking at the very last one. It says, in Sydney yesterday, Australia beat fellow World Cup qualifiers Uruguay 2-0, but the match was marred by a serious injury to home striker Ray Bartz, scorer of one of the goals. He was taken to hospital, paralysed down one side of his body, following an incident with Uruguayan Luis Gansto, who was given his marching orders. There's a lot going on there that hasn't been said, isn't there? I mean, it must have been one hell of a incident in order to paralyse him. Yeah. And sort of talk the other article about the 3 sent off at Parkhead. I mean, back then being sent off was a huge thing. So that's why it's such a big story that 3 were sent off. So yeah, it had to be something really serious back then in order for a player to be sent off.
Yeah, I mean, even bookings. Yeah, well, it would have been slightly earlier than this, but Best was booked 4 times in a season, and so had to go to the FA to get an extra punishment for the disgrace of being booked 4 times. There was United played Leeds in the FA Cup semi-final in 1965. And it was this sort of notoriously bloody game, finished 0-0. And there's all these classic moralising pieces of how can football survive? Is this how our best players are going to conduct themselves? All the usual nonsense. 2 players were booked, and there were questions asked whether the referee could actually handle the replay when he'd already booked 2 players. Did that compromise him that he'd already booked 2 of them?
You quite often find those the sort of scenario you talk about there, that they actually get booked for talking back rather than actual fouls. The fouls all it's part of the game, just get on with it. But as soon as you talk back to the referee, back then that's what the bookings were quite often for.
Yeah.
But maybe this is a sort of some of the things going on here is a sort of, you can just see the beginnings of the hooligan element coming into the game, whether it be on the pitch or in the stands or something. There's just a sort of underlying feeling that it's getting a bit more brutal, the game.
Well, it was United in that season in the second division when they got the really bad reputation for it, because they're turning up in these smaller towns. You just weren't used to having that many people, and local police just couldn't cope. And so I think they'd already had a stadium ban, hadn't they? Because they had to start a season. They played in Plymouth at the start of the season, one year, maybe Anfield as well. But I seem to remember a dart being thrown or something, and I think that would have been 2 or 3 years earlier than this.
When they played a home game at Anfield.
I remember them playing at Plymouth.
Right.
That's not to say they didn't also do it at Anfield. But I think it was the 74-75 season where United, it became sort of a habitual thing, and with them.
All right, so we go over the page into worldwide. Now you'll see, I don't know if you've noticed this, Jonathan, but we've sneakily put in a link here to your novel on this page. If you go to 100 Club in the corner.
Okay, I missed that. Russia's 100 Club. Oh, okay. So excellent. Well, thank you very much.
So I'll just read that out, and you can maybe tell us a wee bit about this. So it says 100 Club. A new member has joined Russia's 100 Club. Players who have scored 100 or more goals automatically gain admission. The latest member is Streltsov, who once blotted his copybook by serving a jail sentence after hitting somebody. So I don't think that's quite accurate, is it?
Well, it's accurate in as much as he served a jail sentence after hitting somebody. He was also convicted of having raped her at the same time. I think that's slightly worse than blotting your copybook. My novel, which is called Streltsov, but I was slightly baffled by this because Streltsov had retired he retired in 1969, I think.
Right.
So I don't know if they only invested in 5 years later, but he'd definitely done it earlier. But the novel is about this real figure, Edward Streltsov, who was this brilliant young footballer at Torpedo Moscow. He scored a hat-trick in each of his first 2 games for Soviet Union. The first one was a 16-year-old. He would have been 19 at 58 World Cup. He was sort of expected to be the star of the tournament. Obviously became the 17-year-old Pele. But on the eve of the tournament, on the final day of Soviet Union's pre-World Cup training camp, he went back to Dasha with this woman, Marina Lebedeva, where something happened. And she accused him of rape, and he was then convicted of it. Now, there's been all kinds of suggestions that he was framed. I have to say, having gone through the evidence, can I say this 100%? No, but my inclination would be he was probably guilty. The problem is that it's always difficult to prove consent when 2 people go in a room together. But when there's no DNA evidence, it makes it even harder. All we know is that she had sex with somebody of the same blood group as him. However, there was one other person in the house that night who had the same blood group. So it is possible it was the other person who was an Air Force officer called Edward Karakanov. So the novel is basically it's seen through the eyes of a functionary at Torpedo who sort of comes to he sort of falls in love with Streltsov. He reveres Streltsov as this sort of great young titan, and then goes through this process of disillusionment, where he tries to process that his great hero might have done something pretty horrific. And it's available. I mean, please get through the Blizzard website, because then I get more of a cut. But if you really have to get through Amazon, then that's better than not getting it at all.
Is a novel something you always wanted to write, Jonathan?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, it was something that when late teens, I assumed that writing novels would be what I'd do. And then, the reality of having to make money went differently. And I'm very glad it did. I love football journalism. I'm probably a better football historian than I would have been a novelist. But during lockdown, had a bit of time and thought now's the chance to do it. I've been considering this subject for years, and I've sort of written little bits here and there. But you need time to sort of to write the thing properly and let it sort of marinate and shape it properly. So I had time in lockdown and got it done. And it allows you to investigate events you've already written about, but in a different way, to investigate the sort of emotions behind it, and sort of to dramatize it, to put yourself in the position of the characters, to try and work out what they were thinking, what their motivations might have been. And then, I hope it also sort of looks at sort of deeper themes of truth and how possible, because the thing is written around the court case. So the court case is trying to establish the truth. The apparatchik at the club is writing his truth, but of course it's very difficult to pin down what that truth is. And that, I think, is something that's easier to investigate in a overtly fictionalized form than it would be in a history. You're writing a history saying we don't actually know if any of this is 100% true is pretty self-defeating. Whereas a novel that's written through the eyes of one person, it's much easier to investigate that.
Have you spotted anything else then on the worldwide compiled by Chris Davis?
Well, I'm going to have my weekly dig at Pele. Pele has announced that he'll play several exhibition games in South Africa to raise money for underdeveloped black areas, which means we know that Pele counted whatever goals were scored in those exhibitions in his grand tally of 14,000 goals. Yeah, I have a bit of a Pele, fantastic player, but I just don't believe his numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I was always a big Pele skeptic. And then I watched I think it's Libertadores final, around the semi-final against Boca in '62. And he is sensational in those games. Like, the kicking he gets and the way he just sort of fights people off, incredibly, all the skill in the world, but also incredibly physically tough and resilient. But I would accept that his goal tallies are, it's not like having scored 100 Premier League goals or even 100 goals in the Soviet Supreme League.
I think I worked it out. It was he had to have scored at least 40 goals every single season, and his career had to start from 16 up to about 40. So, it was like, that's not going to happen, no matter. I mean, I don't even think Ronaldo or Messi would be up to 1,000, or have they? I don't think so.
I think Ronaldo, he's at 700 and something, because he's just broken Pepe Bicham's record. But even there, I mean, Ronaldo's figures, I think you can be pretty. There's slight disparities, but fundamentally, we know what we mean by a senior game. Whereas Bicham, because he played for a whole series of sort of Hungarian regional 11s and things, like, what counts, what's real, when is a friendly, and when it's actually a bit more competitive than that. So any of these figures, you sort of, you're not really comparing like with like.
There's a wee piece there that says an amateur player who insulted the referee during a local Spanish league match received a very harsh punishment. He was sentenced to 100 hours of hard labour at Vigo. This involved mending goalposts and fences, sweeping playing fields, and helping to build a new beach pitch.
I mean, is that hard labour, or is that just what apprentices did all the time in those days?
Especially out there, it's in the sunshine, so he's probably having the time of his life.
Right, and the facing page there is another Tartan Talk column. Tartan Talk by Ali Hunter, the goalkeeper. And the headline is, "Seeing the World Cup on TV has made me a better keeper." So this is him talking about his Scotland career. As you know, I played in the qualifying match against Czechoslovakia at Hampden last September. We won 2-1, a victory which qualified us for the World Cup finals for the first time in 16 years. And that, though, was my last appearance for the Scottish international team.
It's a lovely picture underneath, isn't it, of David Harvey diving at the feet of a Zairian forward.
Yeah.
But it's just the composition of that with the Zairian far right, the defender far left, and him diving at the ground in the middle. And that sort of, you can see the trees behind the stand in the corner. Just, it's a lovely, evocative shot.
Yeah, and a great Zaire shirt there.
Oh, it's a great shirt, isn't it, with a leopard on the front, yeah.
John Blackley, do you think that is, on the left? Do you think?
Could be number 6.
Yeah. Don't know if that's John Blackley. Certainly Danny McGrain. I don't know who else that could be. Number 6.
We advert there, if you see there in the middle, for Tic Tacs, Tic Tac mints.
Yeah.
On the advertising hoardings.
And then what's one next to it? Did I say Voling?
Roenta, maybe?
Yeah, I don't know.
It could be Roenta. That's like they do irons and things.
Oh yeah, kettles and that. Yeah.
Right, well, we go over there. We're coming to sort of home straight at the last few pages of the magazine. So the full page picture, colour picture of John Connolly of Everton. And then on the right-hand side, we've got focus on David Nish of Derby County. So John Connolly there's got a big beard.
Yeah, I always think he looks a bit sort of Nicolas Cage in that one.
Yeah, it's a classic Everton collar with the white sort of triangle, which they brought back, didn't they, when they won the league in '84-5? That's it's a great classic Everton shirt.
Dishevelled, I think, could be the. I think he's got that Vaseline thing going on his eyebrows.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely his right brow. There's definitely something in there, isn't there?
Yeah. And the focus on David Nish, quite a colourful photograph there, with the red and the yellow and the blue. Have a look at some of his answers. Most memorable match, beating Spurs 5-3 in an FA Cup replay in 1973. Biggest thrill, captain Leicester in the 69 FA Cup final. Biggest disappointment, being beaten by Juventus in the 72-73 European Cup.
I love his dislikes. Gardening and being asked to open fetes, etc. Yeah.
And he's person in the world you would most like to meet picks Ilian Stasi, the tennis star. Over we go again. So cliffhangers is the next thing. This is talking about the battles for the English League Championship. Leeds United and Liverpool were neck and neck in the latter stages of last season's League Championship. First one and then the other seemed to have the title in their grasp, but Leeds finally took the trophy that their irresistible early season form indicated. So it goes on to talk about other league seasons with the two teams going for the title until the end of the season.
Yeah, this piece, I have to say, it felt a bit odd given that 71-2 was arguably the greatest finale to a league season ever. When Derby had completed their season, were on the beach in Mallorca, or literally in the hotel, with Peter Taylor listening down a phone, and both Leeds and Liverpool failed to win, which handed Derby the title. Like, surely that's just given this was only there was a season before last when this was written. Surely people remembered that. Surely you didn't have to be told that title runnings could be very, very tense when you had that. But it's also, title runnings in those days, people drop points all over the place.
Yeah.
And that's the big difference to now that, was 18-19 when Manchester City won the last 14 games of the season to stay ahead of Liverpool. And you look at it now and it appears a similar process is underway. That
Yeah.
they're only a point apart, but they're just winning relentlessly.
Yeah. No, it seems that they can only drop points playing each other. So almost what it gets for other seasons, other teams will be able to take points off the two teams that are going for the title.
Well, I mean, this is part of what we're talking about. We're talking about Bremner, that the physical toll on players was what gave you, I think, those big collapses and the loss of the form late in the season. And while that's obviously sort of bad in terms of the quality of football played and terrible for the players, it's fun. Like, you know, it is good that you see these teams absolutely tying up and desperately struggling to beat weaker sides. I mean, the season when Leeds lost out to Liverpool, when would that have been? To United. That was in 66-7. And Leeds went to Birmingham for their last game of the season. And if they'd won, United would have had to get a draw against Villa in their final game. I think certainly, they've had to get something. And Leeds are 3-0 down at half time against relegated Birmingham. And they do come back to draw 3-3. But that means unless United lose something like 20-0 to Aston Villa, they're going to be champions. And they did lose, but lost 2-1. And you sort of think, the idea that a relegated team would go 3-0 up in the first half against this Liverpool or this Manchester City, it's just utterly unthinkable.
Right, so we over then to pages 34 and 35. This is Soccer as I See It, Alan Ball. It's a remarkable number of high-profile players in this magazine writing columns.
Yeah, Ball, Keegan, Bremner, what was his name? The Scottish keeper.
Ali Hunter.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good quality product in that regard. Oh, and the fact that even Saldana and Tomaszewski, they've got big names, which makes it all the odder that they stick a picture of Peter Osgood on the front.
So the headline here is Frank McClintock, my number one captain. Alan Ball talks about one of the most underrated jobs in football is that of captain. Too many fans take this task for granted, and I believe that some even feel that all a skipper has to do is the toss-up. So as he talks about the various captains that he's played with, including Bobby Moore and Jimmy
Bobby
Armfield.
Moore as well, the other one who's written for this magazine.
Yeah. But he talks about Jimmy Armfield being a captain at Blackpool. He was a fine skipper and helped me an awful lot when I was a youngster. He used to look upon Jimmy as a sort of father figure, and he was always willing to help me in any way he could. He taught me a lot about professionalism. I could hardly have had a more dedicated teacher.
He was a lovely man, Jimmy Armfield. I met him a fair bit when he was doing his Radio 5 commentary. So England games and things he'd always be about. And just one of those people who's always happy to chat. No graces. Because it was him who told Jack Charlton he got the Ireland job.
All right.
That farce is. It's too long a story to go into here, but basically Jack had got down to the final 3, which eventually became the final 4. But it'd been so long ago. The FAI had been faffing around for so long. He'd basically forgotten about it and gone hunting. And they made the decision, and John Giles, who's one of the other candidates, and thought he was going to win, was in a hotel primed to go on the Late Show with Gay Byrne, and the meeting drags on and drags on and drags on, and eventually they give it to Charlton. So Gay Byrne's just given a bit. It's an amazing clip. He's given this piece of paper, live on the Late Show, which the show that everybody in Ireland watched.
Yeah.
He sort of reads it out, going, "The new manager of the Republic of Ireland is Jack Charlton," whatever that means, and just flicks a bit of paper aside. And there's this deathly silence in the studio. Then one bloke whoops, and they just go on talking about something else. And it's only the next day they managed to get hold of Jack, who's can't remember where he was, but he was off hunting somewhere. And it was Jimmy Armfield who managed to track him down. He said, "Jack, well done, you've got the job." So, which job? "Oh, the Ireland job." Oh, good. And then rings back there and goes, "Yeah," he says yes. But yeah, such a mess. But anyway, so Jimmy Armfield, lovely man.
All right then, let's go at home with the Stars. Again, this is a sort of classic shoot piece, isn't it? So this is Graham Cross of Leicester, pictured with his family at home, getting up to all sorts, playing cricket out in the garden.
It's just it's classic 1970s, isn't it? Everything about it, the clothes, just the decor. It's about everything 1970s.
What's he actually doing at top right hand picture? It looks like he's drinking a yard of ale, but I presume that's not what he's doing.
I think it's a trumpet or something, or a bugle or something.
Vuvuzela. Yeah, it seems to be. Yeah. And then the goal lines, again, is more letters. This week's star letter comes from Stephen Barnett of Leek, who wins £2. Let's see continental stars in Europe. Before the World Cup finals, few people in Britain had heard of Carlos Babington, but his displays in midfield for Argentina made him one of the competition's stars. In fact, Carlos could have been playing in the Football League for Stoke City. The Potters were ready to sign him up for £60,000 a couple of years ago. However, problems regarding a work permit stopped the transfer going through. What a pity the present rules prevent world stars from playing in England. Their presence would surely increase interest in the game. So that's just something we touched on earlier on.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to pick up Babington, who, is a sort of peripheral figure even in Argentina. But it's interesting as well, the clubs who sort of tried to pioneer this, the fact that Sheffield United ended up getting Alejandro Sabella, but they nearly got Maradona.
Yeah.
And, you first hear that story, you think, oh yeah, of course they did. But they actually did, and then end up with Sabella. I guess, those chairmen with slightly more entrepreneurial zeal sort of recognised not just what they could do on the pitch, but the sort of the publicity that big foreign names could bring. Yeah,
well, that's what happened here in Scotland in the 60s with Hal Stewart at Morton, where he'd plundered Scandinavia for a number of Swedish and Danish players who were in Scottish football at the time, and sort of got the headlines for it.
Yeah, so Morton was to Scandinavia as Shakhtar Donetsk was to Brazil. Is that what you're saying?
Andy, anything you've seen there from the goal lines?
Just send your letters to goal lines. So the black box at the bottom. So when writing to us, please mention the 2 features you like best in the latest issue of Shoot Goal. Now, this brings us back to the recent podcast that we did with Barry Tomlinson, who was the editor of Roy the Rovers and Tiger, and that was a tool that they used quite extensively through the comic. Was basically any time there was a competition or you wrote in, you also supply what your favourite strips were, and that just gave them free market research as to know what the best things were. So Shoot, we're doing it here as well. I don't think I'd noticed that before, but maybe because we spoke about it with Barry, it's been in my head as well. So that was quite interesting to see that.
All right then, let's go the last couple of pages in the magazine. Here's George Burley, Leeds reject Ipswich success. So I think George Burley was rejected at Leeds as a teen. I think he was only about 15 or something when he went down for a trial at Leeds, and then obviously made his name at Ipswich Town. Marked George best on his debut.
And was part of a Sunderland team that got relegated to the third flight in 1987.
So he's not fondly remembered then?
No, I mean, I don't think anybody would blame him. No, I mean, he's obviously brilliant for Ipswich and, those UEFA Cup winning days and everything. And then he was Ipswich's manager as well, wasn't he, when they finished 5th in the league in 2000, 2001. And then he started quite well at Hearts and it fell away. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think Hearts were challenging for the title that season, about 2006, I think. Up to about January, I think.
Yeah. But no, he wasn't the big problem. And basically, Sunderland always get relegated to the third flight in the 8th year of a Tory government. So thankfully, whatever happens now, it's going to be several years till we get to another 8th year of a Tory government.
And there's a wee advert. I think we spoke about this before. Andy's wee advert there for the official Spurs
Yeah,
shop.
I was going to bring that up just because the one thing I always mention is that Spurs, more than any other club, were ahead of the game when it came to advertising about merchandise and stuff, and that's 1974. They've got an advert in here. Usually it would be like when a team like a Villa, they would have done it straight after winning the European Cup, sort of building and winning the league, building on the success of that. But Spurs were doing it. Obviously, they weren't waiting till they actually won something, or they'd probably never have anything in the magazine. So, yeah.
And on the right hand side there, the Score a Soccer Century, which is the quiz, which again for that page they've used that pink that's been in the magazine quite a bit. Any questions we've noticed from those?
Let's look at number 20. Rearranges jumbled letters to find the nickname of one of Scotland's top clubs. ETHSDO or NO. What could that be? What do you reckon?
I can't even read what those letters are. ETH.
ETHSDNO.
I will give you a clue. It's actually 2 words.
2 words, yeah.
The.
Yep.
The
Dons.
Dons. There we go.
Yeah.
That's 3 questions you've answered successfully on this.
And then on the back page, the final page, is a colour picture of John Hollins at Chelsea. This is a posed for photograph, maybe at the training ground or something, judging by the trees in the background.
Good looking man, wasn't he?
It was a good badge as well. That's
Yeah.
a nice photo, and like the blue of the shirt and the blue of the sky. It's just a nice photo.
Yeah. I mean, you can definitely see his son in there, can't you? Is it Chris Hollins? Is his son?
Yeah, isn't Chris Hollins? Doesn't he have some distinction as being the only man ever to play league football with an Oxbridge degree?
Okay.
I think that's true. Because he played like one game or something, got injured, and then went off and went to university.
All right, so that's us got to the end of the magazine.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan. So you mentioned that have you completed the Charlton Brothers book, or is that something that you're still working on?
Yeah, it's with the editors now, so it should be out. I think November is scheduled release, so I don't know if it might bring that forward to try and get it before the World Cup, but definitely be out before Christmas.
So who's the publisher for the new book?
It's published by Little Brown, so it'll be the first book I've done with them. But hopefully the first of many. But yeah, it was nice to kind of go back and do something in the Northeast. I spent a lot of time up in Ashington, and yeah, Ashington's such a fascinating place that it's a town or a big village of 25,000, 30,000 people, but between 1961 and 1967, it produced 3 different winners of Football of the Year in England. It's produced not just the 2 World Cup winners in the Charlton brothers, but also Mark Wood, who won the Cricket World Cup with England. And it's arguable, but I think you can make a decent case that Mark Wood isn't even the best fast bowler from Ashington, and that's Steve Harmison. It's an incredible sporting heritage for such a small place. And what I really like about it is the Wetherspoons is named after the Guyanese batsman Rowan Kanai, who played a few seasons there in the early 60s, which I think just shows how sort of integrated sport is in the community. Like when you look at like the sort of the parish magazine or parish magazine equivalent from sort of the 40s and the 50s, and it's just this weird mixture of details on terrible mining tragedies and reams and reams and reams of sporting results, because the sport was clearly such a major part of life there.
Right. So in terms of your other books, where's the best place to get them from?
Most bookshops should have them. If you go to Amazon, I just don't get very much of the money, so please use bookshop.org or go to bookshops, and try and just chip away slightly at the hegemony of Amazon. But fundamentally, as long as you don't go to second-hand shops where I get no money, I don't care where you buy them, just buy lots of my books.
And if somebody wants to get a hold of you or follow you on Twitter, where would they go?
Jonawills, Jonawills. The first four letters of my first name, first four letters of my surname. And I'm on Twitter, and all details of things I've written in books, will be there.
And Jonathan, is the Greatest Games podcast still going?
Well, we're on a break at the moment. We'll see where we're going with that. There's a few ideas being knocked around. I think we can safely say that there will be a Blizzard podcast on the history of football coming at some point in the not too distant future. Whether it's the Greatest Games format, whether it's a different format, I'm not sure at the moment.
Okay. I mean, I think if people are listening to our podcast, they should already be aware of the Greatest Games podcast. But I think there's quite a good archive there that they can delve into.
We've done well over 100 now, and it's me and Marcus Speller, the two presenters, and we have a guest on, and we talk about an old game, and it might be a game of great historical significance. It might be a game of great personal significance. It's just three people talking about football, either in a very light-hearted way, a very emotional way, or looking at the details of the history of it and what it meant in the wider context. So it's hopefully the tone is pretty varied. So there's something for everybody there.
Brilliant. Listen, Jonathan, thank you for spending the last day and a half with us doing this podcast. It's been very, very enjoyable and appreciated. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you very much.
And so, if you're following the podcast, there will be a website. There is a website, so there will be an associated web page for this show as well, which will share the magazine contents as well, so you can watch along and while you're listening back and look at the magazine. And we'll also include some links to the non-Amazon web pages in order to get the books and things like that as well. So thank you again, and thank you to Tom for being Tom.
Yeah, thank you. I will actually just plug my book.
Yeah.
This is only my first book. This is just out last week on Pitch Publishing. We made the Bangry, Scotland at the World Cup, Spain 1982. And again, go to Waterstones, W.H. Smith, bookshop.org, or anywhere at all, really, to buy it.
I was on holiday in Fort William during that World Cup.
Oh, wow.
So I remember watching the 2-2 draw with the Soviet Union in a guest house in Fort William.
Wow.
I was 5, so I may not remember it that clearly. But
well, would that be your earliest footballing memory then?
I remember the FA Cup from that, the FA Cup final, but pretty much, yeah.
Right, so
and I remember we were, because my mum was quite, she was able to stop us watching football, me and my dad watching football all the time. So we were, the day that England beat Czechoslovakia, I remember we were walking down Fort William High Street and saw Trevor Francis score in a TV shop window. In the days when TV shop windows were a valuable source of news and information.
That was a shameless plug from you there, Tom. We'll be having words about that later on. So I was going to suggest doing a separate show for it, just me and you, but we can
do that as well.
You've had your moment. Listen, thank you again to everybody. We hope you've enjoyed it. Until the next time, let's shoot the breeze.